Now, if you ever become so ill that you're unable to work, you're still going to need a way of paying your bills. That's why so many of us take out some kind of income protection insurance to safeguard ourselves if the worst happens and our regular income stops. Ian Tallock did that several years ago. He hoped it was just a precaution and that he'd never need to make a claim on the policy. But then he did have to make a claim, and his cover didn't pay out. Ian was convinced that he'd been treated unfairly, so he came to us.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
If you couldn't work due to a serious illness, how would you manage? Could you survive on savings or on sick pay?
250,000 people per year have to stop work due to ill health. More people insure their pets than their income. Extra, extra, read all about it.
Only around 10% of us have taken out income protection insurance, the cover that, if the worst should happen, is designed to step in and pay a proportion of your earnings so you can still live comfortably. In Balnain, near Loch Ness, former paediatric doctor Ian Tallock is one of those who did take out an income protection policy when his wife was expecting their first child.
We thought it was about time that we got responsible and started doing something for our future, because it wasn't just our future, it was the future of our children as well.
But in June 2011, a year after taking out the policy, Ian started to experience a weakness in his right leg.
I became increasingly aware that my right leg was leaden and I was unable to move it. I began to think that there was something here that would probably need investigated in a hospital setting.
Shortly afterwards, when it was investigated, Ian was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, or MS. MS is a disease of the central nervous system and affects around 100,000 people in the UK. No one knows the exact cause, but over time it can lead to significant disability. In the months following his diagnosis, Ian began to experience difficulties in walking, plus pins and needles in his right arm, chronic fatigue, and short-term memory problems. And he and his family soon had grave concerns about the progression of the disease.
What I've been told is that additional support of some kind or another will be required, whether it's just a walking aid or perhaps a wheelchair, but the future is very, very uncertain.
By June of 2014, Ian's condition had deteriorated so much that he had no choice but to quit his job. Unable to work, he was initially relieved that he'd taken out that income protection insurance. For almost 4 years, he'd been paying a monthly premium of £66.34 to Friends Life, which he'd hoped would give him a monthly income until he turned 60. But Ian was in for a real shock when he contacted Friends Life to make what he'd assumed would be a routine claim. The company came back to him in February 2015 with the devastating news that it would not be accepting his claim and therefore would not be paying out the cover he expected.
I was extremely distressed. It's true to say that my wife and I were both in despair for a length of time. I can't even begin to describe how we felt. A mixture of sadness, despair, anger, helplessness. This has made things extremely difficult for our family.
So what was the reason for not paying out? The company said it was because Ian had failed to tell them about some brief episodes of blurred vision he'd experienced back in 2004. As part of the medical questions routinely asked by most insurers for this type of policy, Friends Life had asked Ian about his eyesight, which included a reference to blurred vision. Now, blurred vision can be one of the many early symptoms of MS, but as these episodes had been fleeting, and long before any other problems became apparent, Ian hadn't considered them to be significant.
The main reason why I wasn't concerned was that these episodes, each of them, spontaneously resolved after about 5 seconds. Given that they never impaired my actual forwards vision or my ability to function in any way, they didn't worry me.
And when 6 years later he'd been taking out his policy with Friends Life, and telling the company his medical history over the phone, Ian hadn't given these brief episodes a second's thought, so he hadn't mentioned them.
It was only 13 months later, when the diagnosis of MS was being made, that these episodes were brought to mind.
It didn't help Ian's case that his consultant's report when diagnosing his MS mistakenly said he'd previously experienced blurred vision for several months, rather than the few seconds that Ian claimed. But in any case, Friends Life now told him that had it known about any episodes of blurred vision, however brief, he wouldn't have been eligible for the policy in the first place.
The key question is whether or not the symptom experienced in 2004, for which reason this policy has been discredited, was material or in any way relevant to MS. And the answer is unequivocally no, it's not. It has no predictive value at all when it resolves after 5 seconds. I feel incredibly angry, but helpless at the same time. Friends Life reneging on this policy means that we do not have financial stability for our children.
The company did say it would refund the premiums he'd paid over the years, but in despair and worried about his family's future, it was at this point that Ian contacted us. Now, when we got in touch with Friends Life about their decision not to pay out, there was a dramatic change in the company's position. The company told us it would now start to pay Ian's claim after all, and would like to apologise to Ian for any distress caused to him and his family. It said that following a second review of his claim, the insurer felt that, on balance, it was reasonable for Ian to have answered the questions the way he did when he took out the policy. Although it reiterated that, had they had all the information from the outset, the cover available to him might have been limited. Friends Life stressed that it always follows a robust claims assessment procedure and is committed to paying as many claims as possible. In 2014, paying out more than £265 million in protection claims to over 7,000 people. For Ian and his family, given the circumstances, it's the best news they could hope for. And while his experience is a reminder of just how careful you need to be when buying any sort of health cover, particularly one you may depend on in the future, when we spoke to Ian again over the internet, his utter relief about the company's change of heart was obvious.
The relief was indescribable whenever it dawned on me that Friends Life were going to pay out in full. It was only possible to continue fighting because of your involvement and the Financial Ombudsman Service and the encouragement of the wider family. It's really just made a colossal, indescribable amount of difference. So thank you.